Hi, everyone. I'm very delighted to introduce you to Koji Muto from Key Hydrogen today. And I would like to start off just by you telling us a little bit about your academic and professional journey prior to starting Key Hydrogen.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. So, yeah, my name is Koji. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Key Hydrogen. My background, so I started off my education is in mechanical engineering, and then I started off my career at ExxonMobil. So, not so climate friendly, but learned a lot in the energy space. And there I was mainly based in Houston and did some work in Europe. And actually, the last project that I worked on was the UK's largest hydrogen project. So it was a $800 million expansion of a refinery because hydrogen it's used plenty today, but mostly it's in kind of petrochemicals. So that was, of course, a gray hydrogen project, and that's what we're looking to displace. And then it became quite clear that Exxon will be the one of the last oil majors, I think, to kind of transition to cleaner energy. So I left, started working a couple different climate tech startups. I had early roles at a company doing small modular nuclear reactors in the US, one doing direct air carbon capture in Berlin, which I think really set the scene for me to kind of figure out, this is where I feel like I can provide the most impact. And especially with my mixed kind of engineering, technical, and commercial background along the way. I also did an MBA at London Business School. I felt, it was a good opportunity to try to find a emerging technology and really try to commercialize it and make sure it has impact at scale. So I joined Carbon 13. So they're like a venture studio builder based in Cambridge, and really it brings together solo entrepreneurs and helps form teams within the cohort, and it's all climate focused. So that's where I met my co-founders about 2 years ago now, and then we had this idea of building off of our CTO's research at the University of Cambridge. But really, the most important thing and the time we spent a lot of time working on is just validating that product market fit, and is this something that is needed. So we spoke with plenty of people up and down the value chain, and really validating that this made sense before deciding to launch the venture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, could you talk us through a little bit more in detail about this journey from idea to execution, and kind of what were the points that made you realize that this was really worth pursuing?
Yeah, so as the name suggests, it was focused on green hydrogen production. We've expanded a bit, and now we're also looking at CO2, but we can dive into that. But yeah, it was essentially with this thesis of everyone talks about green hydrogen and this whole hydrogen economy, but I know from my background, hydrogen is nothing new. The world already produces 95 million tons of hydrogen every year. It's like $180 billion market today. It's not like a future thing. But the carbon problem is that all that hydrogen is still from fossil fuels. Over 99% of all hydrogen produced is still from fossil fuels, so it's not green at all. It's actually incredibly carbon intensive, and it's a question of, okay, there are methods to produce green hydrogen, but it's too expensive, and at the end of the day, it's a commodity. So if green hydrogen costs 4 or 5 times as much as gray hydrogen, no one is going to buy that huge price premium in like a commodities market, and there are some subsidies in the place, but they're not enough to bridge the gap. So but we know this is a problem that needs to be addressed, both from a market potential and a climate potential. So we start off with that first kind of thesis of how do we tackle this problem? Is there a better way to do it? And then starting off with some of the expertise that our CTO Michael had, looking at this novel pathway, which is a kind of a electrolysis or electrochemical process utilizing biomass. So it significantly reduces the energy we need, which is the largest cost driver for green hydrogen production, while also making a useful co-product. So it's just getting back to the first principles approach, saying, why is green hydrogen so expensive? It's because 70% of the cost is from just electricity, because it's so energy intensive, and it's not something, this is a process where we can significantly reduce that. But it's having that idea, but also validating it against the actual market. So, getting on call with people up and down the hydrogen value chain, from producers and users and transporters to consultants, financiers, project developers. So, getting the whole understanding and make sure this is a market that we understand, that maybe there's some other issues, but and making sure we understand, is this something that our solution actually addresses? And from those conversations, that's where we became quite confident. Okay, this is something, one, unique, that no one else is really pursuing. We have the technical expertise and the validation, and also the potential is massive. The amount that we can drop the energy required, while also producing a useful co-product to get that cost of production down significantly. I mean, we're targeting cost parity with fossil fuel based hydrogen, around $2 a kilogram. That's something we didn't see achievable or feasible with any of the current technologies without subsidies, whereas we can hit that without subsidies. So that's what gave us a lot of confidence during essentially doing due diligence on ourselves and trying to convince ourselves, like, is this actually going to work?
Mhm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I would like to kind of a little bit circle back into when you talked about how you met with your co-founder back at Carbon 13, and if you could expand a little bit on your experience with building out a team and your approach to incorporating the values or like the ideas of diversity, inclusion, and interdisciplinary skills.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think Carbon 13 does a good job of, I mean, they don't match anyone, right? So they let the teams form organically, but they do provide frameworks, and there's some sessions they host. And one of the things they recommend, really emphasizing as you're forming a team, is to form a team around a specific idea, but rather this, skill set diversity and set of values, which I agree with, and I think is very critical, because a company will pivot, half a dozen times by the time they finally get to their final, product. And if that one idea is the only thing holding the team together, then that can quickly unravel. Whereas having a stronger foundational, inherent, set of values, and the thing that really, I think we aligned on, agreed on to tackle as a team, was that there's a lot of things you can do in the climate space, hardware or digital and deep tech. We only wanted to focus on the things that were going to be hard to do, because we felt we had the right set of expertise and skills to tackle these kind of tough problems, but also we were only interested in problems that had this potential to have an incredibly massive impact at scale. Not to say, digital solutions won't have a large impact, but I feel like a lot of these, like, the low-hanging fruit has been taken, and a lot of digital solutions around like optimization and efficiency gains, which is absolutely critical enablers. But really in the physical space, and when you're talking about changing the paradigm and the energy world, it is the physical role that you will need to bring in a physical process. So the only thing we aligned on as a team was, whatever we were working on, it's going to be hard. It's going to be something hardware. It's going to be something deep tech. And we agreed to be a team based off just that, before even like aligning on a specific idea. then we started getting into a lot of different things around Michael's background, around my background, and things around like carbon sequestration and nuclear and things like that. But eventually, we settled on the green hydrogen aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that like yeah, you certainly have some like research and science background. Well, many of you guys, and kind of how what would you say to other people that have similar backgrounds and that would want to transition into entrepreneurship and green entrepreneurship in particular? What should they keep in mind? Maybe what kind of resources or networks they should tap into to help them with that?
Yeah, so I think that there's thankfully that ecosystem has really developed. So there's depending on where you are geographically, there's a lot of different networks. So just even doing a quick Google search and seeing what events are being hosted. I know in London that there's quite a few. And then yeah, getting yourself right into that ecosystem. And I think the best thing you can do if you're like really interested in entrepreneurship and maybe starting your own business, but you still want to learn a bit more or kind of see if you have the opportunity, particularly if let's say you're a student or you have time to do an internship at a startup, and the earlier the better. So I would say that was my most formative experience of being working at Neocarbon, which is the direct air capture company in Berlin. I was their first hire, so just after the founders, and seeing that progression from like the earliest days up until they closed their first round. That experience, I think, gave me a lot of that insight and confidence to say, okay, this is something that I think I want to do and get involved in, and something I can work at myself.
Yeah, thanks. Now I would like to touch upon a little bit on some challenges that you've had, and kind of how you overcome them and what learnings you got from them.
Challenges. I mean, we always get a ton of challenges, and it's funny just because like when I think back, every challenge seems so existential, and we're so focused on it, um, and it seems like, oh, if we can just get this over the line, then like we're clear sailing, and then you just immediately hit the next thing, and then the thing that you were worried about just seems so silly, and you're like, oh, that wasn't a big problem at all. I mean, I still remember when our biggest problem was we couldn't even think of a good name to call ourselves, and what we had this whole big spreadsheet of trying to figure out what we can do, and we're like, oh god, like until we find a name, we can't register the company, and we can't do all these things, and like we just need to figure this out. But I mean, yeah, we've hit plenty of challenges around hiring and the technical development and space constraints around the lab, and finding the right equipment. But it is, I mean, obviously there's no magical formula. It is just persistence, and creativity as well. That's the beauty of a startup, is you don't have to follow a certain process. These are kind of experiences that you can do whatever as long as it's legal. Do whatever is available to tackle them. And I would say some useful things are, don't be afraid, or definitely actually actively look externally, right? So if there's a specific expertise or a problem around this certain technical challenge, there are a lot of consultants in the space. Don't be afraid to use them. It makes more sense for a startup to have like a consultant that might be expensive, but use them just for a small period of time to solve this critical problem, rather than trying to hire someone when you might not need them after you solve that one issue. Advisors and mentors, a lot of people who want to be helpful, especially in the climate space. And I would say the most useful thing actually is talking to other founders, especially founders that might be just like one step ahead of you, because they've went through that same process, those same growing pains of starting a company, some you know logistical, regulatory hurdles, or whatever, and they will hopefully be able to share their insights and share a lot of that unglamorous side of the startups and advice there, and that's been really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's some really cool advice. Um, now I'd be also a little bit interested in, well, going back to talk a little bit more specifically about Key Hydrogen, is how do you measure the impact of your company on the environment and society, since it's kind of impact driven as
Yeah.
well?
So the main thing is always going to be carbon emissions and abatement. And there's some additional pieces around that. We want to make sure we're not harming biodiversity, and we're making sure we're working with local economies. But I'd say we started this venture in the climate space, and we want to have that measurable impact. So I mean, at the moment we're still small scale, testing out the technology, making sure it works. There really isn't any climate impact, but we definitely, once we start, actually producing things at more commercial industrial quantities, we'll want to make sure we have the right practices in place to have that full LCA analysis, and making sure, okay, we're not just greenwashing and say, okay, just look at this aspect of the business and this is what we're doing to help the environment. We want to make sure our net impact is considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned how this field and how everything is very fluid and dynamic, and there's like no one strategy. You just kind of have to adapt as you go. But if you could maybe talk a bit about um, your kind of future, your vision for the future of climate tech, and kind of where it's heading, and what advice you'd give to starting entrepreneurs on, in terms of maybe like some opportunities or what to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, I think unlike a lot of other trends that might become like hype cycles, I think climate is a very sure, I don't know what you call it, like a mega trend or whatever, but it's something that won't go away, right? Climate will always be an issue, and maybe it's a bit of timing. There might be some up and downs if certain governments and politicians come in place and they want to de-emphasize the focus on climate, but we know that it's only going to be worse. And if it's ever not an issue because we solved it, then great. That's fantastic, and that is the ultimate goal. But I think it is one of the most surefire like investment opportunities to say, you want to start building up your skills and repertoire within the climate tech sphere. And there are so many people doing that. It's never too late. I know plenty of people, even Carbon 13, there were a lot of people that might have like 20 years of banking or finance experience, and they've been successful at what they've been doing, but they didn't really see the passion or impact out of that. So they want to start working in the climate, but they don't have any background, so they're just jumping straight in. So there's a lot of people that don't have any experience, and they want to jump in. And there's a great support system and ecosystem for that. So it's never too late to do that, and I wouldn't say it would be any regretted opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds very encouraging for sure. Um, just to kind of slowly wrap things up, I would like to ask you about your own personal vision, and kind of what are your aspirations of your personal contributions to the climate tech sphere.
I mean, I think it's quite nice that there are a lot of events and conferences and accelerators and programs. So I like to get involved, and it's a mix of learning from other entrepreneurs that come before me, but also trying to encourage others, like having this discussion, but also talking at other panels and things like that. So as much as I think that's what I really appreciate. Maybe I see it more in the climate space than other fields, where it does seem very collaborative. That certainly there are competitors in this space, but at the end of the day, everyone has the same goal in mind. So I think as far as I've really seen, that everyone has been really helpful. And if you want help, they will share their insights with you, and they want you to be successful as a company, and make sure you have an impact, just like everyone is working on. So I mean, I just wish to have a similar kind of direct impact in terms of carbon mitigation, but would definitely love to increase my indirect impact of encouraging others to join, and work in the climate space.
Yeah, that sounds very nice. Do you have any concluding pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
I mean, I just go for it, like if and I think this is a great opportunity where in the past, it may have always felt like if you want to do something good and impactful, it's a trade-off of, okay, do I make money, or do I like work in a nonprofit and eat ramen and like do something good for humanity? But there's so much money and investment, and as I was saying, this ecosystem that's built within the climate space, that it's no longer an either or, that you can easily work in climate. And there's so many investors that have a similar passion, that they want to make sure it's not just people that are well off and can afford to take a huge pay cut that can do this. You can do both, which is it's good. It's unfortunate that it's come to this place, that like there
Yeah.
needs to be this big push, but it is needed. And I think it's a good time to it's a fantastic time to, I think, be able to work in something that you personally feel good about, and you find impact and purpose, while also progressing in a good career, and having a good job, and everything.
Yeah, as you said, climate is a big threat, but also a big opportunity. So kind of a double-edged sword. Well, thank you very much for this interview.